Hello, and welcome to Candidates Up Front. This is a public interest election program of Berks Community Television and the League of Women Voters of Berks County. Our May 16th primary election is coming up. Democrats and Republicans will vote for judges, school directors, and county, township, borough, and city officials. The deadline to register to vote is May 1st. To check your voting status, go to votepa.gov. That's vote.pa.gov. You can register, change your party, locate your polling place, or apply for an absentee or mail-in ballot. The deadline to register is May 1st. The deadline to apply for a mail-in ballot is May 9th. The League is interviewing those candidates who wanted to be interviewed in contested races. For each race, the candidates will get the same basic questions and the same amount of time to answer them. Hello, I'm Judith Cranus, a member of the League of Women Voters of Berks County. There are 3 candidates competing for a chance to be the magisterial district judge in District 23301. And that district includes Brecknock, Carnarvon, Robeson, and Union Townships, and Birdsboro and New Morgan. All the candidates have cross-filed, which means they're on the ballot for both the Democrat and the Republican Party. And the 3 are Mike Kaufman, Melissa Seidel-Karpovich, and Nicole Rosella. And voters in each party will select one to be on the fall ballot. Now, the magisterial district judge handles traffic violations, landlord-tenant matters, and civil actions where the amount claimed is less than $12,000. The judge presides at arraignments, sets bail, issues warrants, and performs duties of a similar nature. The term is 6 years, and the salary this year is $106,245. Now, please remember that the opinions expressed in the interview are those of the candidate, not necessarily those of the League of Women Voters or Berks Community TV. Now, this interview is with Nicole Rosella, so welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And let's get started. Would you tell the viewers about yourself and why you are running?
Sure. So as you mentioned, my name is Nicole Rosella, and I am running for District Judge of Southern Berks. I am a Berks County native. I was raised in Birdsboro, graduating from Daniel Boone High School, where then I went and received my bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Alvernia University. My roots have always been very deep in Berks County, specifically Birdsboro, Robeson Township, and the surrounding areas. And the reason that I am running is just that, to continue my deep roots in the community. I'm very active with different youth programs, as I have 4 young children who are in the Twin Valley School District. So I'm a volunteer coach. I help with the PTO events and fundraising, partner with our first responders, being our police departments, our firefighters, and most recently, in the past 2 years, I actually created a nonprofit for the youth in our region of Southern Berks, and it's located in Birdsboro. So that just gives me the opportunity to continue to spread out those deep roots to others so that they can be involved in things that I always enjoyed to do.
Thank you. And my next question was what education and background you bring to this position, which you've pretty much covered, but is there anything you'd like to add to that?
So my bachelor's, as I mentioned, is in criminal justice, but I did minor in psychology at Alvernia as well. And I also went on and I received a guest teacher certification. So that allows me to go in any school in Berks County and sub kindergarten through 12th grade, which I typically do schedule allotting 2 times a week. And again, just another opportunity to get involved in the community.
And tell us what personal qualities you feel you bring to this job that would make you a very effective district justice.
Yeah, I personally believe that to be a district judge, it's not so much about having a law enforcement background as it is to be personable, approachable, and really treat people with dignity and treat everybody fairly and remain impartial. So just this position, in my opinion, needs to be that liaison between law enforcement and the residents of our region.
And tell us about the district you serve. What are the people like, or what are the area like? Just tell us what you feel about the district.
I believe that our district is unique in that they are all smaller towns, so we all do know each other. We are affiliated in one way or another, whether it's our kids are in sports, the schools, different organizations. So I think that's unique, and I want to continue that and just better what we already have that Judge Glass has made for our region.
And you've mentioned some of the things you do in volunteer and community work. Is there more you'd like to tell us on that?
Yeah, I believe it's one thing to talk the talk versus walk the walk. So again, very deep in the roots, not just from the youth perspective, but doing different volunteer work for our veterans with the American Legion in Birdsboro, helping different church organizations. One of them, the Nazareth Church in Birdsboro, they have this great program where they take donations, and twice a month they'll have an event where anybody can come from anywhere. They'll give you a bag, and you could fill it with as much items there as you need. Clothes, shoes, food. So any way and every way there is for me to help in our community, I want to be that person.
As a district judge, you will be dealing with matters of both civil law and criminal law. Could you explain the differences? We like to educate people on what the actual job is you'll be doing, as well as talk about you. So could you explain the differences and maybe give us some examples of each?
Sure, and you did a great summary in our introduction. So as you mentioned, civil, typically we deal with more of the tenant-landlord issues, and then for the criminal cases, we can go up to $12,000, and typically it's theft, a lot of DUI cases. I was lucky enough to observe Judge Glass in his courtroom once a week for a couple weeks there, and the most popular things that he sees in his office is just that, theft, DUIs, and landlord-tenant issues.
And tell us how you would look at a landlord-tenant issue. What sort of criteria do you look at?
For this position, I believe it's all factual based. So you can't let your emotions get involved. You need to see what the facts are, and the law is the law when it comes to landlord-tenant issues. So if the evidence shows the tenant is not at fault, then the tenant's not at fault. If it shows they are at fault, then they need to be at fault and be held accountable. But again, it's case by case and just taking the facts that are presented to you.
Could you talk about the district justice's role in handling criminal issues?
Sure.
Because you're the first place that the case comes to, right?
Correct. Yes.
Explain about that.
Yeah, so we are the first judicial officer to hear any of that evidence. So typically, it's your first time you're going to present all your evidence, whether you have representation or not, and then based on what you present and what the judge decides, then that will determine if the case is dropped or if you need to go on to the next level.
Which would be the common pleas
Correct.
court. So you're looking at all that initial
Yes.
evidence and reviewing it. Is it similar or different with a civil case?
I believe it's very similar in the fact that you have to look at all facts presented, listen to both sides of the party, treat them with respect and dignity, and just go based on that. And again, just getting to observe Judge Glass, he is very fair in that I've seen somebody come in on both criminal and civil, and they might not have had enough time to find representation, or they might admit their guilt, but they might not have the money to pay their fine at once. So on both sides of the situation, just doing what is right and treating them the same as far as criminal, civil, and taking them to the next steps.
So I was going to ask then, if we talk to the criminal, the role you see it would be not different in the civil issues. You're still looking for the same things. I mean, if I say that somebody said they were going to do work on my house and I paid them and then they never did the work, what kind of evidence would I need to bring in to
So yes and no is the answer to your question. Yes, I think they are similar in that the evidence, no matter what type of case it is what you need to follow. But I think in a civil case, it's typically where, like you just said, somebody didn't maybe necessarily do what they were supposed to do, somebody didn't follow their lease or contract. Same thing as the law. You didn't follow what you were supposed to be doing. So holding somebody accountable, but if there's ever an opportunity to give alternate help and resources, I also think that's important, where sometimes people don't know what they don't know. So did somebody do something intentionally or did not do something intentionally, or was it truly you did not know?
And what are those kinds of resources you're thinking of?
So for the most common one that comes to mind right away is speeding or some type of traffic citation or violation where a police officer might have given you A, B, and C citations where they have points associated with them, but then after you hear all facts presented, they had no prior record or any citations. They're admitting their accountability, so paying the fine, but not necessarily giving them the points for their first citation, as that could affect their day-to-day livelihood of them getting to work, which then would affect them not being able to pay a fine. So taking every case situation by situation and seeing if there's alternate things we could do for them instead of giving them everything that we're able to give them the first time.
And you were talking about looking at the information in the case. How, as a district judge, do you decide if there is sufficient evidence for a criminal case to go to trial? And what do you consider? What are the things you go through in your thought process to make that determination?
A great thing about this position is there is always a representative on our side in there. So you have a lawyer who knows everything inside and out and kind of gives you the recommendations as to what the county is recommending. And then you would meet with your honor separately in their chamber to discuss what their recommendations are. And then based on the particular person, again, if it's their first time, if the judge knows them, that they've been there repeatedly, that is going to determine what the outcome of that case is. So relying heavily on your counsel that's there for you.
And I guess we should note that for our home viewers that there is a training course that district justices go through before they may take office, and that is required of all of them to make sure they are comfortable with the law. And some candidates will take it before they're elected, some wait till after, but there is that mandatory training so that they all are going basically on the same scope, and the Pennsylvania Unified Justice System monitors that to make sure everything is working.
Correct.
Have you chosen to take the class before, or are you waiting until after?
I have, we actually have the next meeting is coming up on April 29th, and the next class is held the month of June. So some viewers may not know, but it is a 4-week class in Harrisburg. So you physically live in Harrisburg for 4 weeks as you're in class from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I have chosen to go to the class in June, even though it was a very tough decision. Being a mother of 4, I want to get that experience under my belt.
Got it. And your family will survive, right?
I hope so.
One of the things that district justices do is set bail. What criteria will you use to decide whether bail is needed, and what criteria would you use to decide how high bail should be?
So that is a question that I can't confidently answer, as a big part of the district judge course is learning about bail. So I couldn't confidently answer that, but I'm sure it'll go along on the effect based on whatever the crime was committed. That would determine the amount of bail, as well as has this happened before? Because there's many different types of bail.
That would be true. And from what you said, you tend to look toward what would make it work rather than going mandatory to the highest thing. Would that follow here?
Yes, again, depending on what the cases in front of you and the evidence, and then what the council would recommend.
Okay. This is a question in a different vein. Are there community problems that a district justice can help alleviate?
Ooh, this is a good question. So in my opinion, the district judge can be involved in the community very deeply, but most importantly, I believe, can serve as the liaison between law enforcement and the residents of the region. So some residents might have a negative view on law enforcement with some of the things that have happened recently, not necessarily in our region, but with corruption, or some people looking at law enforcement, they fear them. So I think that this position can come in there as a true, again, just liaison between those two, and bring back like when I was younger, when you saw a police officer, I was never afraid. It was, hi, how are you? Because they're doing great things in the community. So just restoring that is what I would think could be done differently.
So building the relationship
Correct.
between law enforcement and the community. As a member of the judiciary, what can you do both on and off the bench to ensure that all Pennsylvanians have access to the courts?
Well, I believe whether it's on the bench or off the bench, it's always about being transparent, being honest, being respectful and kind, and I wouldn't treat anybody any differently on the bench, whether I would off the bench. You certainly need to be professional and avoid those conflicts of interest. So you're certainly going to have situations, again, in these small regions that we live in, that somebody's going to come in front of you that you know, but you can't treat them any differently. You have to remain impartial and do what's right for the community. And again, that's whether you're on the bench or off the bench.
Mm-hmm. And is there any way you can expand that beyond the people who are in your courtroom? Would you think of ways to get that out so the general public understands?
Mm-hmm. I believe, again, just going to different events, whether it's a chamber event, different fundraisers in different communities, and getting together with other district judges just to see what they're doing that works, that doesn't work, and how we can come together as a group to improve, like you said, not just my region, but all of our regions and the state of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. Voters tend to think, oh, I don't know about judges. I'm not going out to vote on May 19th, which is the election day, or applying on the ballot. Could you tell our viewers why it is so critical, this position, that why the work of a district justice is so important, that they really should pay attention and they really should vote for this office?
Another great question. And my answer to that is because we all hope that we're never going to have to be in front of our district judge. Because if we're there, it typically means something good is not happening in our life. But as you mentioned, they are the first person that you are going to see to hear the evidence. So if and when you ever needed to go in front of a district judge in a courtroom, what person do you want on the other side of you? Do you want somebody who is, again, fair, kind? They're going to listen to you. They are not going to automatically assume that you are guilty of something. They're going to hear all the facts in the case and truly remain impartial. And I believe that myself, not being a law enforcement officer, I am the only candidate that can truly be impartial from law enforcement officers. And I'm going to treat everybody the same, listen to the evidence, and treat the case fairly.
Mm-hmm. And I think then we're ready for your closing statement, and you have a minute.
Sure. Well, I just want to thank everybody here for having me. It's been lovely. This whole process has been overwhelming with all the support that I've received from the community. And all three candidates, including myself, I believe they're great. And I hope that no matter who you choose, that we serve you proudly and we can continue to work together to make Southern Berks a greater place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We thank Nicole Rosella for being with us today. I do need to remind people that There are 3 candidates that will be on their ballot on both the Republican and Democrat side, and the other 2 are Melissa Seidel-Karpovich and Mike Kaufman. I'm going to take one more minute to remind you all the things the district judge handles. It's traffic violations. I think we talked about those. Landlord-tenant matters, and that hits a lot of people, especially when we're in the economy we're in. Civil actions, when the amount claimed is less than $12,000. And we would really hope nobody here is affected more than that by a civil matter. It's not fun. The judge presides at arraignments, sets bail, issues warrants, and performs duties of a similar nature. So that is what the judge is doing, and that's why it's important that you are voting for it. I'm going to remind you that there are several resources available to you to learn more about the candidates. One is the League's vote411.org. That is an online voter's guide. The League in Berks County used to produce a voter's guide that appeared in our newspaper. That went away some time ago, but we have this online guide. And it is the same kind of nonpartisan information. We tell you about the position. We tell you who's running. We let the candidates speak for themselves because we think that's the best way for you to get a view of who the candidates are. So you only need to go to, and it's probably not up running until April. Depending on when you're watching this, it may be up or not yet. But it's vote411.org, O-R-G. And you type in your address. It does not hold on to your address. It just keeps it flittingly there till it brings you to your own particular ballot. And there you will see, if you live in one of the areas we've been talking about, Brecktown, New Morgan, Brecknock, New Morgan, one of those areas, you will find the names of these candidates on your ballot for district judge. And if they've entered information into Vote 411, you will see the information they provided. The League never touches that information. We let them speak for themselves because we feel that is the very best way for you to hear directly from them. And I will note on the side, the League hates those negative ads you see on TV. We'd prefer you pay no attention to them. We'd prefer you get information that the candidates have provided that explains their views on things. So that is the best way to do that. If you're not sure of your registration, you go to vote.pa.gov, and that will tell you everything you need to know about voting. That site is in Spanish as well as in English, so whatever language you prefer is the language you should use it in. And we thank you for watching Candidates Up Front. You will find the Candidates Up Front interviews on BCTV and on its website and its YouTube page. And for more information on candidates, you can go to the League's online voters guide, vote411.org. Or you can contact Berks County Election Services, elections@countyofberks.com. Their phone number is 610-478-6490. And thank you for watching Candidates Up Front.